which I think you guys know that I'm here with Michigan Campus Compact, and then I have a colleague here.
Hi, I'm Sam Moriquas. I'm a former AmeriCorps member here at the Michigan Nonprofit Association. I ran the College Positive Volunteerism training for pretty much my whole year of service.
Great, thanks, Sam. So I just want to give a quick overview of how this is going to work today. Sam and I are really going to talk through this train the trainer piece that we're kind of doing with all of you today. So there really isn't a train the trainer, but rather like that's separate from this, but we really walk folks through the training as we would do it with the college students or anyone else being trained as a CPV, and we really pause along the way if you are going to be a trainer. In this case, all of the people on the call are, and just to discuss what we would do in certain spots and when, and what some examples might be, and that sort of thing. I think that's worked really, really well as far as a train the trainer. I think in the past people thought, oh, maybe we should develop a train the trainer, but realized that really wasn't necessary because people truly do need to see how sort of the training progresses forward, and that just interjecting and talking through certain pieces throughout that process was probably the best way. So that's what we're going to do today. We'll definitely talk through some of the various pieces, and we'll talk about all of the different pieces in this next slide that you need to successfully run a training so that you can be looking out for those throughout this process today. We figured might as well look up, talk about them up front, and that way you can look out for them and it will feel more comfortable, and you'll, I think, feel just in the end a lot more comfortable. Do you have anything to add to that?
Sure, yeah. And it's my understanding that at National Campus Compact you've seen a lot of the toolkit resources, but I think in our minds this training piece in this PowerPoint is really just as relevant, if not more relevant, than the toolkit, and the toolkit is really a reference that you get once you've been through this training. So we're just going to go through it today to the best of our ability, and this is really what we have for the state of Michigan, and obviously this presentation can be adapted by you guys for your future use as well.
Definitely. And that reminds me, so you'll see that all of these slides will say Michigan Campus Compact on there, or have our logo, and then in the remaining slides, so not this first one, but all the rest of them, it will say copyright MiCC. We know that that needs to be updated and changed, and so it would be something for National to decide if you put, the copyright National Campus Compact in the general one that goes out to all of the states, and we can update ours as well, or if you just want to put nothing at all. So those are some of those pieces to be looking out for, and obviously again it can be adapted to say National Campus Compact or North Carolina Campus Compact or whoever, but we wanted to show you the broadest version of this PowerPoint that we have in sort of its original format from the update, the most recent update. So that wanted to go over that and just throw it out there. So to go through the training components, I had sent everyone a link to where we would find those on the website, and it only gave you 3 of these different things to print off. I'm going to go through all of the components for the entire training from beginning to end that you would utilize as a trainer. And so Sam and I will be going through some of those today, and you'll see what we're using, and then you'll see what you're using on your end. So obviously there's the CPV Toolkit, and that again is used as a resource, and it's important to have it in front of you for the training. We think, whether it's electronic format or I think for all of us, in our case who are on the call today, probably the print version just so you can flip through it the first time, and as we're referring to different pieces, and a lot of the activities will really help us navigate that more. The CPV training PowerPoint presentation, obviously this is what Sam and I are utilizing today to guide the CPV training. Again, it is quite broad as a starting point, and many of our constituents or grantees will add in some site-specific information or tweak it slightly to fit their programs. However, it is really important to note that they keep the main components of it, or it really wouldn't be a CPV training. So there's the 3 parts, and you'll see that as we go through. The activity packet, so we had sent that as something we had wanted you to print out. It contains 4 activities that accompany the CPV presentation. Whoever is conducting the training will print enough of these packets out for the trainees. There's an activity after each of the 3 sections, and the second section actually has 2 activities, which is why there's 4. And then it helps the trainees to practice utilizing the material again and the information in the toolkit. The review sheet, so you also have that. At the end of each of the 3 sections of the CPV presentation, each trainee will answer 10 questions about the content of the section, just to ensure comprehension of the material. The trainer, again, prints out enough copies of this sheet for each trainee. We'll talk about those as we go through them, but they're very easy. It's just to make sure we're, making sure everyone digests the information and that we can move forward in the training. We usually do that as a big group. I mean, they really are easy, and you'll see that. And then the review and activity answer key. So Sam and I have that here on this end. It's the document that includes the answers to all of the review questions and the sample answers to all of the activities. And then the CPV certificate. Each time a trainer trains a group of CPVs, they can print out the certificate that's available. They'll sign and date it and put that trainee's name in it, or names in there, and each person can walk away with a certificate that says they're officially certified, with quotations, as a CPV. And actually, we realize that a lot of college students cherish that. Some put it on their resumes, and so it's definitely something that they feel enhances their sort of toolbox of information and resources, and we feel that way too. And I mean, I still have mine from when I was trained.
It's on my resume, that's for sure.
We will definitely be happy to send anybody on this call a certificate. So, anyways, those are the different components.
So the training that we're about to go through, the presentation, has 3 distinct parts. The first is, what is CPV and college access, where we'll just sort of talk about the mindset of the college positive volunteerism model and college access as a whole. Part 2 is being a college positive volunteer, what you can do in your community, how you interact with students using this model, etc. And lastly is paying for college, part 3. And that's oftentimes the most important, because people who even have been to college have really only experienced maybe one source of funding. Maybe they have a lot of scholarships or financial aid, or maybe their family paid for their schooling. So it's good just to know the full set of options and really equip these CPVs with that whole model and all the possible outcomes of funding.
So you'll see on the screen that these are the goals for the CPV training, both understanding what it means to be an ambassador of higher education as you serve in your community, and that you're a resource and not an expert, and then being comfortable having conversations with youth about post-secondary options after high school, and navigating the CPV Toolkit as well as the website. And we're hoping to achieve these 4 goals and really be in the mindset or the frame of mind when going in to work with K-12 youth that we would want our CPVs to understand that these are our goals.
Yep. And I think one thing you'll hear throughout this training is that line about you are a resource and not an expert. That's a very key component, just knowing that you do have limits even within your capabilities of training, but you can do a lot with that being said. So going into the first part of the training, this is college positive volunteerism and college access. This is the definition of a CPV. A college positive volunteer is a college student who is aware of how they impact the college readiness and enthusiasm of the youth they interact with as they volunteer in local communities. So I think the key component here is that it's defined based on awareness and being cognizant of how you interact with students, how you present this college material, and it's really not a certain set curriculum maybe, but it's just that mindset of knowing very active thinking in terms of presenting college to you.
And so it is important to make sure that we all share what our definition of college is with the CPVs. We utilize the National College Access Network definition of college. And so when we say college, we refer to colleges and universities that are 4-year, 2-year community and junior colleges, vocational, technical, and business schools which have certificate programs of various completion times. And so you can see that we really have, again, a broad definition of college, and that is so important when going in and working with K through 12 youth, that they understand all of the options.
Again, we're going back to the fact that CPV is mostly in a mindset and a frame of thinking. Another important facet of that is that college is attainable for everyone, regardless of economic background, whatever social background you may come from. Just that belief that college is something that everyone can do and everyone can attain, whether it be in terms of funding or just knowledge and what they hope to seek. And it also ties in with what Mel was just talking about, and there's so many different types of college options that you can really succeed with, and we believe that everyone can achieve that.
And then CPV has a motto, and so the motto is it's avoiding language. Okay, the motto is, are you going to college? Or not are you going to college, but where are you going to college and how can I help you get there? So we want to avoid language, sorry, I got it switched around, avoid language such as are you going to college, because that you know, gives them the opportunity or the option to say yes or no, and kind of stops the conversation. And so we want to use where are you going to college so they can begin thinking about that, and how can I as a CPV help you get there and reach that goal. And so it really opens up the conversation that way.
Yep. And that's very tied to the belief that college is attainable for everyone. You're inherently showing that belief by asking these type of questions of where are you going to college and how can I help you get there. So we're going to go through the first activity. Hopefully you have it in front of you, Maggie, and everybody else who's on the call. Let me pull it up in front of myself here. So the first activity is really a set of 6 questions that are sort of about the student's experience with college to date. So oftentimes you're speaking to middle school or high school students when you're doing this, or you're speaking to the college positive volunteers that you're training who are in college currently. So it's speaking about questions such as, why did you choose to go to college, or did you always know you were going to attend? Was there a college near you where you grew up? So at this point, we'd love to hear from anyone who's on the call, really. I'll unmute everybody right now. If you care to share maybe an answer to why did you choose to go to college, and did you always know you were going to attend? So if anyone wants to jump in, feel free to do so.
Or really any of those questions, and we'll give you a second to just look through and see what that activity looks like.
Okay, this is Meg.
Yeah.
I'll just want to answer your question, and I'll say that one of the reasons that I went to college is because it was part of a value in my family, and my parents were always talking about it, really encouraging it, and so for me personally, it never really felt like an option. Although I guess I wish it would have been a little bit more in terms of what's the value, but it was an expectation.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Thanks for sharing, Maggie.
Maggie, I have exactly the opposite experience. This is Robin. And the only reason I went to college was because my high school counselor told me I had taken all the college prep courses. So of course I was going. but my family never talked about it, never planned for it. My dad didn't even graduate high school. My mom graduated high school as an average student and went to work for the phone company. And they just thought I was going to be a really good grocery store manager or something. So it's kind of different how we all come to this differently. But I was going to ask Mel and Sam, how many trainings do you do via webinar, and do people really respond to the questions via webinar, or do you tend to do more of these trainings in person? Like, how do you handle this silence?
I think people really need a chance to kind of reflect on this experience, and we would actually probably prompt them a little bit more or call on people if we did it via webinar. I think you can have an open conversation either way, and generally the college students that we're training are really open to sharing their experiences and because they like to hear what everyone else has to say and how they were different. So I don't know that they're, and I can defer to Sam, I don't know if you've had a different experience, Sam, but I think people are generally eager to speak. We just don't have that many people on this call, and I think we're trying to set it up like, okay, reflect on these questions, but realize that it helps you reflect throughout. It's like, what are my experiences? Yes, what do I bring to the table? How might the youth that I'm working with experience be completely different?
I think I would probably prefer to do the training in person if I had the choice, just because I think attention spans are probably a little better when you can look someone directly in the eye and ask them the question. But with that being said, there are plenty of tools to have the discussion via webinar or virtually somehow. So I think whether it's this activity or the whole presentation itself, I probably prefer in person, but virtual can be just as good if it's run correctly, hopefully like it is today.
Hopefully, yes, and I agree with Sam. It's just easier to connect with people, well, a little bit easier in person. But.
Yep. So even in your two examples of the answers to question one, you sort of saw the diversity in stories, and typically with students and college positive volunteers that you're training, you would go through all these questions and really bring out the discussion, and that's really when students start to get into this material and really start to dig into the roots of it.
Definitely. Yeah, you all provided a perfect example in your answers just right there in a very short amount of time, and so I think you'll really see that it opens up the conversation even more, and it goes a lot further going through all of them. But we would like to move forward unless anyone has any other questions about this specific activity.
Mel, when you do this over a webinar, would you spend time going through all of these different questions, because it is a difficult platform, as Robin seemed to suggest a little bit, for audience participation, or would you just take a couple of examples from here, like we just did?
I think you can kind of leave it up to the scope of the presentation. If you have a shorter amount of time with the students, you may want to just be selective about it. If you have a full 2 hours, it probably makes sense to go through the whole thing.
And you could even just call on people, or...
Yeah, and I think the other thing I've done in trainings before is there's space to write out your answers, at least in short form. So sometimes I'll give the college students an opportunity to write out their answers first, and then just sort of have people volunteer with what they think is their most relevant answer that they want to really add to the discussion about, or what they think might be a unique experience to their story, things like that.
Definitely. And Maggie, if you were training trainers, like what we're kind of doing today, I would say you could keep it short and take a couple of examples, like what we did. And then they could go and spend some more time with that activity on their own if they were going to then turn around and do a training. Does that answer?
Yeah, it does. And I think Shauna has a question as well.
Sure.
Hi. So my question is a little bit about the way it's framed as being attainable for anyone, and I'm just wondering if you get pushback from folks who might say, well, yeah, it's attainable for anyone. There are resources out there to support people financially, but, it's not the reality that everyone comes to this on equal footing, and so kind of how, if that's your approach to it, that it is attainable, how do you deal with pushback when people say, well, we don't all come to this equally, and there aren't resources to make it equally attainable for everybody, because some people need more funding than others, and the reality is not everyone can get the funding they need.
Yeah, I think I can speak to that. I think most of what we try to provide here in the coming sections as well of the CPV training is sort of the ammunition for that conversation. Obviously, there's going to be some pushback from certain students, but really having that belief in the students can get them started thinking of college even as a possibility. So even if it's taking a student from not believing that they could go to college to even considering it and, oh, maybe I could do community college for 2 years and then transfer or do a vocational program, just showing them what the options are and showing them that they can do it. And at the end of the day, maybe not everything is successful, but it's about starting that conversation and using the resources that we do have to really, believe in what students can achieve.
Thank you.
Okay. So, you ready for me to move on? Okay. So then we go into what is college access. Obviously, it's important for all of us to be on the same page when we're talking about that. And maybe Sam and I have talked about this before. I think college students maybe don't necessarily realize that what they're doing is college access. They just talk about it in a different way. And so we're just trying to frame this so that we're all on the same page.
Mm-hmm. And I again think this speaks to the question that you just asked about, how are you going to encourage these students that may not believe in themselves to attain college, and really just showing them the broad scope of what college can be and what college access can mean. It doesn't necessarily mean going to a four-year institution. It doesn't necessarily mean, what they see in the media in terms of college. It's just really bringing college to their experience and what can they do.
And we found that CPV really is an excellent way to approach college access in Michigan because it can be this widespread approach, and it's generally broad, but it gives people something so that everybody in Michigan is on the same page and understands terminology the same and all of that. And so we say CPV is one of many college access programs in Michigan. We probably want to say nation. So just other things to think about.
Yeah, and I think in terms of that, college access is often done maybe from the college directly. So, Central State University is trying to recruit you for their college. But CPV seems to be a great model in my experience with it, just in how overarching it can be and how many different types of college access it encompasses.
So here's some data from Michigan that shows the CPVs what our need is, and you can read that there. I would read this to the college students just to let it sink in when going through it, and we have the resources in there. Obviously, this makes sense for Michigan, but National would definitely want to decide what they would want to include within the slides, and that might be national data. Or maybe, yeah, it really just depends. So just wanted to, again, point that out, but I think we can move on.
Here are some more things that you can use to speak about educational attainment with. At this point in the presentation, we're really just giving more statistics that students can use in their conversation with those who are seeking to go to college or may not believe they can go to college. Common Good Forecaster often reflects, going to college is a success indicator for many other things, from money to health to whatever it might be. And these are just more general things that students can use in their conversations to really encourage, youth to go to school.
So this is another really, well, they're all important, but this is a really important component to address because obviously we all know on this call that there are many barriers that youth face when it comes to navigating the college process. So it's really helpful to help make CPVs aware of these barriers so that they can be addressed when they meet with their K-12 youth. And so it falls under the 4 categories that you see on the slide, and we tend to go through that maybe a little more in depth or pull out an example from each. But we do try to address that paying for college is often the most talked about barrier out of these, the affordability piece. And so again, that's this whole part 3 of this training that we'll get to. But there are options. Youth just need to know what they are. And so it's about preparing, the CPVs preparing themselves and going through this and referring to the toolkit so that they have some background knowledge on these barriers and can address them again when they're meeting with the youth and if they come up.
Again, here are more benefits to having a college education. This is just more things to speak upon. One of the best stats on this slide is over a lifetime, the average individual with a 4-year degree will earn $1.6 million more than a high school graduate. So that's often a great statistic to cite in terms of speaking with K-12 youth who, that's a huge figure to them, and even as an adult, that's a huge figure. So to be able to say, hey, without a 4-year degree, this is what you wouldn't get, but with it, here's the difference in terms of your lifetime income. And you know, students who may be a little more motivated by money or just that's their perception of things, it can help invigorate them to look into college. The rest of this slide is really more of the same, have better health and longer life expectancy. Those who have been through school will be more civically engaged, etc. This is just more that you can use within your conversations with K-12 youth.
Definitely.
Can I interrupt for just a second? This is Maggie. Where is the rest of the data drawn from for that slide?
Sorry, what was that? Can you say that one more time?
Where were the rest of the statistics taken from? I see you got it from Georgetown for the lifetime earnings. Are there data sources for the other pieces, just so I can know where the background is for this in case there are questions or we want to check them over time?
Definitely. We can follow up and send what we have as far as research when this was all pulled together about 5 years ago, and then just we can take a look. I don't believe they changed any of these when they updated it the last time in 2012, but we have that original research, Maggie.
That's great. I suspect they'll probably remain consistent, but I'd just like to know the sources if presented. Oh
yeah, I'm sure that's really important too for when you get questions on that. Yeah, for sure. We will make sure you get that. So who benefits from college access programs? Everyone. So we it seems like a silly slide, but just to kind of recap, the nation, the state of Michigan, or whichever state, your institution, K through 12 youth, and you yourself, because as a CPV, you're figuring out all of this information, and again, you have this tool in your toolbox, and we have found that college students who go through the training a lot of times feel more tied to their college experience because they're reflecting on it, obviously, but also learning tools that will help themselves continue to persist throughout the rest of their college experience. So we list 10 benefits of being a CPV here. Obviously, there are many, many more too, but to focus in on those, you know, while volunteering as a CPV, you will have the opportunity to, and we usually just list these out and maybe give examples, impact the life of a youth in your community, be part of a group of students with similar interests, pay it forward, have a new experience, address the needs in your community, fight poverty by promoting education, you know, developing or strengthening new skills, confidence in your interactions with K through 12 youth. We see that a lot of programs that are, you know, teacher prep courses or things like that, CPV is a really great resource, and also as CPVs they have the opportunity maybe before a placement to have more experience with K through 12 youth. Strengthen and diversify your resume or graduate school applications, get course credit perhaps. There are obviously a multitude of benefits of being a CPV, and we just touch on those.
Sure. So this is the first review. As we spoke about before, this is sort of just to gauge that students are comprehending what you're presenting to them. So most of these questions are pretty easy. We will go through them very quickly. and expect that you will probably get most of the answers right away. So.
And college students tend to like raise their hand or shout out the answer, and they do it as a group, and it's just fun, and they say, oh, okay, we got it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Question 1, what is the toolkit definition of college access?
Okay, so we'll just say the answer because we know there's only a few of you on the call. So the toolkit definition of college is helping K through 12 students consider, plan for, and attend post-secondary institutions after high school.
Question number 2 is, what is the CPV motto?
It's B, where are you going to college and how can I help you get there? And don't mind the slide. Sometimes when we download these in different ways, it bumps itself around a little bit, so just know that going in that. I don't know why it does that, but I think because it's available to be modified, it just sometimes happens.
Yep. Question 3 is, what is the CPV mindset?
College is attainable for all students.
What is a benefit of being a CPV? Experience working with K through 12 youth, doing something tangible to impact your community. Doing so will look good on your resume, etc. And of course, the answer is D, all of the above.
Who benefits from college access programs? Everybody, D. Which institutions are included in the college access definition of college? 4-year, 2-year, vocational, technical, and business schools.
What is a benefit of a college education? You can look through these and see that it would be D, all of the above. CPVs work with, and this is students in grades K through 12. So this is highlighting the fact that college positive volunteers can even work with kindergartners, and there's activities that can be done to even promote college positivity, even if it's not clearly the most pressing thing in a kindergartner's life.
Who is a first-generation student? The first person in his or her family to attend college. And then the final question, a college access program or initiative would, which of the following? And it would include college students working with K through 12 youth. So you can see that it goes back through the entire section and pulls out pieces that we really want the CPV to grasp. It might seem like a really easy answer to all of us, and we're saying, okay, these are pretty comprehensible, it's pretty easy, but actually when it is important because, you know, some of these terms college students might not have heard of before. And so it really is important to go through it and not to, like people think it's kind of silly, but I would say I wouldn't get rid of it because you are equipping these college students with the correct information moving forward.
So before we move on, we have a couple things from the chat box. The first is for Mel. Can you please share some of how CPV has been integrated into Gear Up through Michigan? Might help Maggie and Shane help with the broad applicability of CPV.
Sure. So we have, we're kind of serving as an intermediary for some money through the state of Michigan, the King Chavez Parks Initiative, who funds the Gear Up programming. I think you guys know what Gear Up is, right? Well, so Gear Up is gaining early awareness and readiness for undergraduate programs, and it's working with a cohort for 7 years at a time, starting from the time they're in 7th grade all the way through the first year of college, and it's helping those youth, often underrepresented youth, first-generation college students, to gain access, again, like CPV, into college. And so we have this grant where currently we have 5 institutions out of the 15 publics in Michigan that receive $15,000. We're in year 4 of the 7-year grant right now. And they utilize that money by having this team of CPVs. So they have 2 student leaders, and they have a team of at least 10 CPVs for each campus. The student leaders help recruit and train the CPVs. And what they do is they infuse CPV with this money. They do trainings and things like that to infuse CPV into all of their Gear Up programming. So everything that they do, we don't want them to change what they're doing. They all do unique and different things. Some people have the college students, the CPV, serve as tutors at their local, well, now high schoolers, because they're sophomores in the Gear Up program right now in high school. And some people do more like the like maybe lunch, like lunchtime mentoring or things like that. But they infuse CPV into every aspect of that. And that idea is that they're trained up front and they have the tools and the knowledge and the language to be on the same page when they're working with the youth. But CPV really gives them an added bonus in the work that they're doing. They do all kinds of different things with the youth, but right now I think a lot of them, most of them, do an aspect of tutoring or mentoring. We have student teachers in one of the programs at Western Michigan University who really utilize that, like I mentioned earlier, and they'll utilize CPV, be trained, go get experience working with the youth. And then we also at Western have some of the service learning courses. They are trained as CPVs and utilize this training in their hours that they get for this service learning class. So.
This is Robin, if I can jump in too. I think that what prompted me to want to share this was Shauna's question about how college isn't necessarily really accessible for everyone, and do we ever get pushback on that? And I think that the partnership with King Chavez Parks is an example of how we're trying to open that conversation through an existing federal program that's targeted towards college access, that they saw the value of training their staff and their students and their volunteers and funneling additional money into using this as a training construct. We also have a unique partnership at Central Michigan, and right now we're focused on 5 schools, but their goal through King Chavez Parks is to get this model into all 15 of the public universities that have Gear Up programs. So that's something we're working on a plan with them for. But I think it's also really interesting that at Central Michigan University, they use CPV as a training for any student who's going to be out in the community interacting with K-12 students. So if you're going to go be big brother, big sister, do lunchtime, do classroom volunteerism, any of that stuff, it's required for you to go through CPV training. So I think it's an example of just trying to change the culture and to really, create a whole new generation of ambassadors in a state where this has not been the way that we talk to our students in the past. So thanks for sharing those examples, Mel.
Oh yeah, thanks for the CMU example. That's actually a really, really good example.
And that also speaks to Robin, I believe it's your comment in the chat box. If people look on the sort of navigation board of the GoToWebinar, you can read through what I think is Robin's comment, referring back to Anna's question as well. And also Maggie shared, yes, it is also important to acknowledge that some folks will have more financial barriers than others, and then provide the info of how to really attack that problem to the CPVs. And that is definitely a part of the training we're getting to. If anyone else has any questions currently, you all are unmuted, and we would love to hear from you just about
this first part, this section.
Whatever it might be.
This is Maggie. I just have a question about timing. How long does it usually take you guys to get through this first section, whether in person or on a webinar? I know we're going through it in a slightly different way, obviously.
I can speak to that. I think it's probably about a half hour for each one. We've taken a little longer with this because we're speaking to some of the elements of how you conduct the training. Generally, you can go through it based on sort of the time slot that you have. We try to allot an hour and a half for the training and then about half hour for each section.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions at this time before we move on to section 2?
All right, we are going to progress. So moving into part 2 is being a college positive volunteer. So in this section, we will talk about what to do before you volunteer as a CPV to prepare yourself on the front end going into the experience. We'll talk about CPV activities by student group and also by length of service, which is really nice, and we're excited to show you that piece of the toolkit, and then any additional resources and activities that we will go through.
So the first piece here is going to be understanding your students, and this slide uses the term at risk, and this was something I really grappled with for a while in terms of concepts within CPV. And I think the key thing here is that at risk is not a label for a student or a group of students, but it's something to keep actively in your mind, as if you look at all these potential at-risk factors, almost all of them apply to us sometime as students. So it's really just showing you that these can cause detriment to someone getting to college, or someone may face multiple of these factors, and really just trying to actively think about it as you interact with the student, and not to necessarily put them in a box as, oh, they're at risk, therefore they're not capable of doing this, but just sort of keeping it in mind as you interact with students and knowing what challenges and barriers they might face in trying to achieve college access.
And that you as a CPV probably have experienced at least one of these in your lifetime at some point. So we all, fall into some of those, and that we're aware of that and their experiences and how they might view the world coming into working with you. So being a CPV, again, I know Sam spoke to this earlier, but CPVs are college resources, but not experts. So CPVs do act as role models, provide resources, help to motivate, offer support and guidance, and share experiences, but they don't give all the answers. They probably don't have all the answers. Make judgment on the youth that they're working with, try to persuade the youth they're working with, or appear to know it all. It's okay to be the resource that looks up the information or helps the youth find access to the pieces that they're interested in.
With that being said, we're going to start getting into the main pieces of content within the toolkit. This slide just sort of introduces what the toolkit is, and obviously most of you on the call have seen it before or had some interaction with it, but we're just going to get now sort of into the depths of what's in there and how you can use it and how you can adapt it as your own. So here's the table of contents. The toolkit is a resource provided to CPVs to aid them when they're encouraging youth. It's filled with activities at every level of school, so elementary, middle, and high school. It has a whole section on ways to pay for college, additional resources which we'll break down shortly, and a glossary of terms and an appendix. And also the Before You Volunteer section is sort of covering a lot of what we're covering in this presentation today.
So what to do before you volunteer as a CPV, and we go through some of these. They're on pages 6 and 7 of the toolkit, so there's a lot more in-depth definition or information or prompting for the students in those. But what we tend to do is read through them and maybe give a couple examples throughout these that are listed. So a couple of those that, and they might seem, again, like, oh, that's common sense, but not every college student that's serving as a CPV is going to have the same experience, much like the youth that we're working with. And you know, what might seem like common sense to us might not have been an experience in a CPV's life. So that's why these are all included. So, you know, SMILE, that's really about, you know, being authentic and removing fear, you know, in the youth that they might be working with, making it a more comfortable relationship. So that, again, might seem small, but that's listed in the toolkit, and that's something that they go through, talking about empathy, being culturally sensitive, maybe wearing your college gear when you go serve with the youth is even a small piece of college access, or being college positive. So if I wear my Central Michigan University sweatshirt, that might open up the conversation with the youth about what I did there and things like that. Be consistent is one that we tend to touch on. You know, just like in a mentor relationship, it's important that you do what you say you're going to do, and that you're there when you say you're going to be there. So again, we go through a lot of these and sometimes give examples. And again, like Sam said earlier, it really depends on how much time you have for the training and if they can reflect on these on their own, or if you come up with something unique and different about how to go through these. So.
This slide is more about just connecting with students and how to do so. One of the most important things on this slide that I tend to speak further on is be willing and eager to learn from the students. The process of being a CPV is really a two-way street, and you may offer as much college knowledge to them as they sort of offer as a reflection on your own experiences and your own life and goals and things like that. So don't view it as I'm coming in to help these students and be the savior, but really view it as a connection and a two-way street. The other things on this slide tend to be, you know, relevant things as well. Oftentimes, as Mel was saying, you think they're common sense, but it's good to know, you know, choose topics that are relevant to the student, ask questions that are comfortable, etc. Continuing on with that, here are some of the frequently asked questions, ideally from students. And I think the thing to highlight and keep in mind is that students tend to not hesitate in asking any questions, whether it be appropriate or not, but you as a CPV need to know how to handle all questions appropriately. So they may ask, you know, how much does it cost to go to college and how can I pay for that? And you should be, you know, ready to answer that question. But they may ask you, you know, what is campus life like? Do you go to parties? What is going on? You know, really like that, based on their sort of media definition on what college is. And you have to be prepared to not sort of work around that question, but just answer it honestly, but, you know, not do it in an appropriate manner. And, you know, in my experience, students don't hesitate to really ask you anything, whether it be one way or another. So just be prepared to handle that.
And just to pause really quick, so this just is kind of outside of what we're talking about here, but I'm thinking about the PowerPoint and national, probably putting a broad version on the website, and that people can then adapt to their state. There are some notes in some of these slides, so for people who might want to download it and they're doing the training and it's important to maybe touch on some other things that are not in the slide. But Sam and I also have some of our comments within, or examples within our slides. So that just, again, as a side note, might be something for us to talk about with you, Maggie, just to, you know, if you would want to have some of those basic components that you might, that aren't listed on the slide, because the slides are already busy enough, I know that, but within the notes section for trainers. So I know that's a side piece, but I wanted to say it before that left my brain.
No, I think that's good, Mel, because as we're going through, I'm making notes about the things that you typically pull out or what you speak more to, and so it'd be really useful to have those notes somewhere.
Okay.
That's a good idea.
Perfect. I'm going to write that down, actually. All right, so another really important key piece is we don't know what we don't know. So it really is important to always break down information and terms about college in an understandable, comfortable manner. and we're saying this to the CPVs so that when they go work with the K-12 youth, they're not, throwing a random, like a GPA out there. Well, they might start talking about GPA. Well, the youth that they're working with might just be like, I have no clue what a GPA is, and I'm afraid to ask, and I feel like somebody's talking about it and they just expect me to know it, so I should know it. Oh no. So this just really helped frame this mindset for the college students that don't assume. We want to spell out everything, and then also helping to provide that foundation of college terms. So there is a glossary that Sam had mentioned in the back of the toolkit, and then you might bring even more terms to the table, but having a conversation depending on the age of the K-12 youth that you're working with about these different definitions and terms. So speaking to the ages and the levels, they have activities divided out by student group within the toolkit, and we try to list the sections here so that you are able to flip through. So this is in sections 2, 3, and 4, and we've tried to color code it on here so that, again, it's easy for people to flip through as they're being trained. But we have specific pages set out aside for elementary school students, middle school students, and high school level students. And within all of these, we have checklists, activities, and reading lists, suggested reading lists for those particular levels of student or age groups. Again, something that we always emphasize with CPVs is that the suggested activities within these sections can definitely be modified. So perhaps you find a middle school activity, but you think, oh, that would be fine for my 5th grade student that I'm working with. Totally fine. That was a question I think we got way back when this was first in the beginning, like, oh, well, it seems like I could use this for, somebody else, so why is it just in this section? Well, we didn't want to list every single activity in every single section, so we tried to break it out easy to use. So if you just flip through, oh, I'm with an elementary school student, great, I'm going to flip through my toolkit real quick, okay, we can talk about this. But again, if you have more time and you want to modify or adapt between the levels, that is something we always encourage.
The next way of dividing up the activities is by length of service. So there's 3 different types. There's event-based, which is either a day event or maybe a week-long camp, something like that, very short-term. And then the short-term activity is a longer event, maybe a semester in length or a few months on end, where you sort of go back to the same themes, such as the example here is writing career stories, etc. And extended term activity, which is a longer commitment, maybe 6 months to a year or longer. Maybe if you're working one-on-one in a mentor relationship with a student, you could do something like that. And really, this gives you the tools to use these activities based on what your needs are. If you're running a class with students, then you can do maybe a short-term or extended term. But if you just are coming in for one class period in a day as, the college positive volunteer for the class, you could do an event-based thing to make sure that you're having the same impact regardless of length. So this brings us to the second activity, which is delving deeper into these activities listed within the toolkit. And I believe you have the Part 2 activity, creating an activity list, in front of you. And what it looks like basically is you have, at this point, you would go through the toolkit. So I encourage you guys, if you have the toolkit in front of you, to sort of flip through sections 2, 3, and 4, elementary school, middle school, and high school, and maybe just see what some of the examples are for activities that you can do. And what this activity 2 is asking you to do is list 2 that you pull out as, wow, that would be particularly relevant to my situation or my students, and also create your own activity yourself, and sort of coming up with a way that you can maybe adapt one, or, oh, this would particularly be, really strong to interact with my students with. So I'll give you a second to look over that.
And so going off of what Sam said about these activities, we often have people just get in groups and talk about some of the activities, or, you know, have you ever done these? What's something you might want to add? You know, one example in the middle school section is making a college collage. So, you know, a college fun collage. Some fun things you can do in college: study abroad, attend sporting events, participate in Greek life, community service. What is it like to live in a dorm? And as you help them create the collage, like cutting out things from magazines, or maybe you can bring, you know, some brochures from colleges that have those types of images in them, maybe explaining what the different categories are and how they function at your college, or what you know about them, to just kind of give them that baseline, because you know, they might have no clue what study abroad is, so that might be an interesting opportunity to talk about that as an option in college.
Yep. So does anyone have questions on what we've covered in this section or this activity, or just in general? Feel free to ask them now. You're all unmuted.
Great. I think we're ready to move on to the next slide. So again, we're talking about the toolkit, and we will go to part 3 soon, which has all the ways to pay for college. But in the toolkit, section 5, it will list all of those ways to pay for college. And
this is an overview of what additional resources are. So when I showed you the table of contents, I sort of alluded to this list. These are things that don't necessarily fit in an activity category, but they can still be very relevant, such as knowing all about the SAT and ACT. I know for me it's been a while since I've taken those tests, so it's good to have the information on hand to refer high school students to. A campus visit checklist. This can be great if you're bringing your youth to the college, and what do you need to do to prepare that event, and what would it look like when you're at the school. An online scavenger hunt for Michigan colleges. This, again, could be adapted for a national base, and other things like that. Overview of internet resources, talking points about your college, etc. Sort of more things you can prepare and more things you can use with the students.
I think this slide really is meant to pull some of those pieces out and highlight those for the CPVs of, you know, let's do a campus visit checklist if you're a high schooler, or maybe a middle schooler. What does it take? What things would I want to know? But yeah, definitely. So the CPV website, Sam is going to pull that up briefly. And don't mind this weird, for some reason, and that's something we might talk with Emily about at National, I cannot get this to even out because all the tabs are supposed to be straight across, so that is another piece. Sam could probably help me work on that too. But anyways, just know that that doesn't normally look like that with the 2 compact logos there. But we would like to just go through the tabs and kind of show you what's in there. So at one point, this got really obviously beyond Michigan, and we've all talked about this, and just Michigan didn't have the capacity to go out and do trainings all the time, or they didn't have a specific person or AmeriCorps Vista member dedicated to CPV who's doing a lot of that initial capacity building and trying to help sustain this across the state. And so they had decided to put it all online for easier access and get it out there. I think this all happened around the time that they talked about it at the National Executive Director meeting back in 2012 in the winter. So this all kind of happened, and so everything is available electronically. Sam and I have worked to try to clean it up and bring it to the most up-to-date place that we can. But there's a CPV resources section, and it just talks about the toolkit's in a couple different spots to download, but you can see these are other resources about before you volunteer. There are some additional alternative toolkits and activities. So the toolkit, the most updated version in 2012, there is a Spanish version available, and that's really exciting. I know that I think one of the AmeriCorps members in West Michigan has been able to utilize that. And there's a College Positive Mentoring Toolkit, which looks honestly very similar to the CPV Toolkit, but our organization here in Michigan, Mentor Michigan, who we partner with, they have adapted this over time to just be College Positive Mentoring instead of volunteer, and utilize some different mentor-specific resources. So that's that tab.
The next tab we have is the CPV training resources. We already went over this list earlier, but the toolkit, the presentation, activity packet, review sheet, and certificate. We can try and pull up the certificate here.
Yeah.
This is what it would look like once you've signed and dated it. This is for if you're running a training, these are all the resources you need all in one place. So it's just an easy way to get it and access it and use it. This tab is unique CPV resources. So these are things that aren't included in the toolkit but still can be relevant based on if you have more specific needs, such as working with students with disabilities, knowing how to work with undocumented students, more information about vocational and technical programs, activities you can do without a computer, activities you can do for youth in foster care. So this is really more specific situations and unique resources you can use for that.
And so what had happened is that, you know, the toolkit would grow, and grow, but also with these resources have to be updated constantly over time. So I think what we have decided is to really keep the broad version of the toolkit in there, but realizing that we could utilize the website, again, as another resource that is helpful that goes with the training, the toolkit, and then the website. So that way, more, you know, the updated versions of things could be just a lot more easily attainable to update. So.
That's PowerPoint. Let me see if I can pull up some of these just so you can see what they look like as well. This is sort of what an additional unique resource would look like. It's a lot of links and a lot of further information, just so your CPVs can be informed and go about their training in better ways. And lastly is additional information, a glossary of terms, a historical timeline of CPV acknowledgments, etc.
And I know Emily will probably be working to update those on your end, Maggie and Shauna, because I ended up giving her all of the information she needed recently for that. So yeah, but this is more as like a resource for some of the other of you that are on here, knowing that what is on this resource, because I believe the national staff kind of knows at least some aspects.
Maggie asked, how do you deal with questions about for-profits since they tend to be predators of low-income communities, especially?
I mean, do you really get questions about?
I mean, would you see these questions coming from the youth or from parents, or I'm trying to understand your question, Maggie. Feel free to chime in.
Oh, hi, this is Shauna. It was my question. So maybe it's not a question that you've gotten. I just know that they do a lot of very active recruiting, and so I just wasn't sure if CPV had a particular stance on it, because there's a lot of research about how students that come from for-profits end up in a lot of schools don't necessarily get jobs, and they aren't accredited the same way they often aren't credit-bearing courses, and so the courses don't transfer when students try to transfer to other institutions. So I was just wondering if that's something that you guys deal with or have like a kind of a pat response to the way you do with some of the other types of questions.
Yeah, to be honest, I haven't gotten too many questions about for-profit institutions. I think it's good to know about them and sort of know what to recommend to students. I think a lot of people have a lot of different opinions on them, but just guiding the students through finding that information could be the most important thing.
And I think within CPV, so specifically you asked if we have a particular stance on it, it's not discussed within the CPV training or curriculum as we know it, or honestly in the toolkit, I think. So that might be something for the future then, is for us to think about, or national think about, just providing kind of some statements or I don't know, opinions on that. But I have not had people ask me about that, but that's a really good way to be prepped to answer those if we do get those.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions about the website while we're on it? If not, we can continue on.
All right. So
it sent me back to the beginning. I'm going to catch up. But Mel, go ahead. Oh, this.
Just bear with us really quick. I don't know why we also need to do that.
It happens. Okay. Back to where we were. There we go. The next few slides are just some resources that we included that can speak further about college access and different things that are important to know. One is the Michigan College Access Portal. There might be something similar, relevant at the national level, but this is something that you can use for a lot of different functions in Michigan in terms of searching for scholarships, calculating the cost of loans and interest and payback, test preparation and resume building, many different functionalities, all very useful to students, and they can just sign up for an account and use that. Know How to Go is another resource. This is, I believe, a nationwide resource, and they have their PSAs with the girl on the skateboard trying to land the kickflip, and she's talking about how tough it is, and then they liken that to getting into college and going to school. Many people have seen those because they were syndicated nationally. There's 4 steps to college by the Know How to Go model. Be a pain, push yourself, find the right fit, and put your hands on some cash. And that's sort of the simplistic way of looking at sort of the same way we're doing it. But Know How to Go's website is very rich in resources, and they have sort of programs locally and resource centers, and it may be the same all around the nation. So another great thing to have.
Okay, so I am just going to talk through this and how we would do this with CPVs. So we are on, let me see here. Where's my activity right here? The scenario one? Okay. So usually we group we have people in person really. So again, this might be facilitated a little bit differently via webinar, but in a lot of cases we're doing with the webinars actually just for Train the Trainers, and so that I think is important to mention that, you know, a lot of times we're training people just like our AmeriCorps Vistas on the line, but then they'll go out and actually probably do a training in person. But we would put people into different groups, a couple people per group, depending the size, and then just assign a scenario. So there's 5 scenarios in this activity, and so we might say, okay, you're scenario 1, blah, 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 so on and so forth. And they would read through the scenario and just come up with a response or an answer that they might give to the scenario. And then we would have each group report out on what they would do in each situation, and we would discuss that. With the answer key, you would be looking for just some of the key components. Clearly, they don't need to have this exact wording or exact answer, but just some of those key components within the plan of action that is on the answer key. And again, it's about that discussion. So it's part of preparing the youth to go into those things. Here's 5 very different scenarios that you might experience to get them thinking about how they might respond in an appropriate way. So this is something that as a trainer I would have you spend some more time with, honestly reading the scenario and then reading the example answer from that. Would you say so, Sam?
Yep.
I mean, for me, I digest this more probably as a trainer if I could read through it on my own and just make sure. But with the college students, again, an easy way is to divide them into groups.
So we'll go on through review 2. This is, again, the multiple choice questions, fairly straightforward, but we'll just go through them and then we can stop for any more questions you might have. So question 1, when volunteering, college students should, give me a answer is have high but realistic expectations for the K through 12 youth.
If you are being a non-judgmental CPV, you will all of the above. Listen carefully, show you care, acknowledge their viewpoints and backgrounds, and watch what you say when interacting with the youth.
A college student volunteer at a 3-day K through 12 activity can be a CPV and an event-based CPV. So this again touches on the length of activities, and the answer is B.
One simple thing all CPVs can do to promote college is wear their college gear when working with the K through 12 youth. So that's a simple, easy way to do that, and that's A.
Question 5, if you are a short-term CPV, you are working with K-12 youth, and this is again touching on the length of the activities, and this is all of the above. It could be for a semester, for 1 month, or 2 months, and again, a short-term activity is anything from a month to a semester.
Question 6, the CPV Toolkit provides all of the above, so D.
Keeping moving. Question 7, college positive volunteers, ... And the answer here is C, our college access resources. Again, resources, not experts.
Question number 8, a CPV working with K through 6 youth would probably not. And it's B, review a college application with the students. It might be a little bit intense for that level.
Question 9, a CPV working with high school students should ... And the answer is A, encourage the students to prepare for the ACT and SAT, as that would be most relevant to them at that level.
And then question 10, the activities for elementary students. None of the above. So the first one, A, cannot be used while working with middle school students. So not true. Remember, they could be interchangeable. B, should not be modified. We encourage you to modify them and make them relevant and adapt them for the situation. And then are the only activities you should use? Obviously not. You could use the entire toolkit, and there are so many different activities. You don't have to use all the activities. You can bring in your own. So again, we try to reiterate that, especially on this question. I know some of the other ones are a little sillier, but.
So at this point, we'll pause for any questions. You all are unmuted, so feel free to speak any thoughts you might have on this section or any material we've covered so far, or type it in the chat box.
All right, we are going to move on to part 3.
So this is the big section on paying for college. Obviously, you guys have asked a couple questions about it already. This is really just a comprehensive look at all the ways students can pay for college, how the CPV might interact with that. And this is often the most important section of the training, as we sort of stated before, because oftentimes we've had one path of paying for college. But as a CPV, you really need to know all the different ways so you can help out students. This slide is about the CPV's role within helping in financial aid. And I think the key point here is that financial aid is a long, confusing, and logistically complex process. So it's really important for the CPV to be well informed of all the different ways that students can help fund their education, and just to be patient in going through and giving all the options and having all the correct information.
And so the awaited ways to pay for college, we have them listed here from most convenient to probably the least convenient or least, I guess, encouraged, but they're all options. And so we will go through those individually, but family and personal savings, scholarships, grants, working and paying as you go, federal and state financial aid, college work-study programs, state and federal loans, and then private loans.
Yep. So the next set of slides is going to be really tackling these listed out one at a time. So first we'll go into family and personal savings. Obviously this is not always an option for students if their family hasn't saved money. These resources listed here are great for parents, especially misaves.com is a helpful savings plan, so it'll give you a calculation of if you're a parent and you start saving for your student even at a 9th grade level and you put away $50 a week, you know, it would tell you how much would amount by the time that student is going to college. So it can be great really to start at any time for parents to use, and Save with Met is a very similar resource.
Next we have scholarships. So scholarships are a really great source of funding. You know, it usually involves students having to maintain certain requirements. For example, a grade point average of 2.8 or above, or, you know, etc. But finding and applying for them can be overwhelming. Therefore, we would want the CPVs to encourage youth to start early and search often, not just, you know, sit down and think they're going to get it done in an hour. The internet is a truly great free resource for scholarship information, and we always encourage CPVs to explain that all of the scholarships should have free applications, and so that's really important. You should not be paying, the youth shouldn't be paying for the opportunity to fill out an application for a scholarship. It should be free, and that's sometimes where some scams can come into play. There are many scholarship options, so that's another thing that is important to run through with the youth. You can get scholarships for just about anything. So there's scholastic achievement, so you know, you had really great grades, you were an honor society member, you know, you had a great GPA, which I guess would correlate with the grades, religious affiliation, race or ethnicity, athletics. Maybe somebody will go to school because of an athletic scholarship for volleyball or something, the field or major that a student intends to pursue, disabilities or handicaps that students may have, special talents, and we have here to utilize the Michigan College Access Portal Scholarship Search function to search for available scholarships within so many different options, and these are just some.
Yep. And the thing I've come across most in working with students about scholarships is that students tend to only know about, oh, you can get a scholarship if you have a 4.0 grade average, and you can get a scholarship if you're really good at sports. But I think the key here is expanding that definition and showing them that there are so many different options for scholarships and opportunities. Very similar to scholarships are grants. Grants are normally given to organizations, but in this case can also go towards an individual for education, and these can be given based on financial need, meeting a certain criteria, a commitment to a particular field of study, etc. Very similar to a scholarship, and just should be, you know, another thing to look out for that could go towards paying for education.
Another option is working and paying as you go. So students might take a limited number of classes per term, probably around 2, and possibly live at home to keep expenses minimal. And then they would be paying for their tuition out of their college classes, tuition for their college classes out of their earnings. It does take probably a lot longer, but students graduate debt-free. So an example of this is my husband. Before we were married, he took a while to complete his degree because he, for a variety of reasons, but definitely because he was trying to work as well as attend school and pay for it as he went forward. And so I understand this example well. I did it a little bit myself.
Mm-hmm. The next section I'm going to talk about is one of the biggest, which is the FAFSA, often mispronounced as the FAFSA or something of that nature, but it is the FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. The key point in there being the first F, which is free. Oftentimes, students might go to FAFSA.com or something like that and apply, and there are scam resources out there that help you fill it out, quote unquote, but do so at a cost to you. This is a free application, and students should know that, and we give the website a couple slides later. This is a fairly easy thing to fill out once you do, or for how much it's worth. It can be pretty logistically complex in terms of the information you need as a student to fill it out. But in the long run, it's very, very worth it, and it's applicable for students attending any sort of college, 4-year, 2-year, or career-focused training institution. This is sort of a general timeline for the FAFSA. It can be completed as early as January 1st, and different schools require it be completed by different times, but generally the deadline is around March 1st. But again, encouraging students to be sure to, if they're hoping to apply to a specific school, look up when the deadline is for the FAFSA for that school.
So Sam and I are trying to give examples in some of these slides. I know we didn't hit examples on all of them, but just to kind of show what we would do if we were training CPVs, just to try to make it more entertaining and help them think about different examples and that, you know, it might affect our life. So we might have some examples, might they have examples. But moving on, so to file the FAFSA, the following documents are required. So we feel it's important to go through these with the CPVs and just list them. Again, a lot of this information is in the toolkit, but we really encourage CPVs that they're not there to help the students fill out the FAFSA because it really does require sensitive financial information. Again, the list above, current bank statements of their parents, child support, income tax, so many things that are sensitive. However, if it is a FAFSA event, we would encourage CPVs to assist with the process because trained professionals would be available for guidance, so they could be sitting with the youth. But they're a resource.
And I think the thing I've most come across in my experience with CPVs in terms of the FAFSA is that a lot of parents are very hesitant to give out this information if they don't know what it's being used for. So the CPV's role can really be to explain what it means to the parents as well, the importance of filing a FAFSA, what it can get for your student going to college, how important it can be towards really funding that opportunity and being sort of the bridge of knowledge in that case.
Sam, this is Robin. Maybe you'll get to this, but I wonder if at any point during this conversation we connect the CPVs back to the local college access networks and the resources and things that they have going on. For example, I know in Michigan a lot of our LCANs coordinate FAFSA drives with the VITA, Volunteer Income Tax Preparation programs, so that for students whose parents don't fill out income tax, they don't know how to do it, it's not affordable for them to go pay H&R Block or whatever, they know that they can go get it done for free, and then the students have access to the resources. So sometimes we might need to fill in the gaps for them.
Right. That's a very great point, and especially the relevance and resource that are the local college access networks in Michigan and elsewhere.
Okay. Oh, sorry. So yeah, Robin, we would want to figure out the best part of this conversation to talk about that and add that in. I think some people do naturally add that in, but I don't know that we've fit it in here as like a core component of this section, and I think that's a really great point. So more FAFSA information, sources of information about this and financial aid process. Sources are guidance counselors at their high school, so encouraging them that they do have resources available to them at their schools. We know that guidance counselors are really overwhelmed and they are working really hard the entire day, but they are a really, truly great resource, and they're a hub for that school, and they are there to help the student one-on-one if they schedule an appointment College financial aid offices are helpful as well. So if they're thinking about possibly attending a local college, perhaps they reach out and talk to somebody, set up an appointment. And also might be interesting for them to bring their parents along so they can start to talk about what kinds of things are needed and what the cost might be. There's the Federal Student Aid website listed there, and then College Goal Sunday.
Mm-hmm. So the Federal Student Aid website is the official site where you would fill out the FAFSA. Anything else is going to be a scam, but that's the official address right there. College Goal Sunday is similar to maybe College Application Week as well. We have a few different sort of events around, fall and winter in Michigan at least, and I think some of them are nationwide in terms of setting goals for, okay, I'm going to get my financial aid application done by this day, or I'm going to apply to this school, etc. So there's a lot of events around that time, and we tend to focus a lot of our CPV efforts towards planning the events as well that can really help students file their FAFSA, know the necessary information, and just have the resources on hand.
So actually this might be the best slide for to talk about LCAMs, honestly, and then maybe talk a little bit to the College Advising Corps or people like that that might be there to help the guidance counselors.
Continuing on, we're getting to state and federal grants. Here's the website for Michigan's grants. It can be anything from children veterans, police officer and firefighter survivors tuition program. A big one that we often go to is the TIP tuition incentive program. Has to do something with Medicaid, and if you've been on Medicaid for a certain amount of time, then you will be eligible for that grant. And obviously federal grants, there's the website, Pell Grants, Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, all those, etc. So this can be just another great couple resources to go to find payment opportunities.
And again, it's not all-encompassing necessarily. There's more information on the website and within the toolkit on those. Moving on to the federal work-study programs. So we are all pretty familiar with those at Campus Compact, but their work studies, paying jobs offered to certain students based on their financial needs, and it could be part of their federal, state, or college-based financial aid. Usually they're on campus or doing local work for at least minimum wage, and the government funds a percentage then of the student's paycheck as part of the work study. And the amount of aid is truly based on the student's pay rate and the number of hours that they work.
The last few options here are getting into loans, something which I'm sure many students know much about. State and federal loans, obviously just making clear to the K through 12 youth that loans must be repaid. They're a great option for paying for school, but just letting them know about they have to pay them back, the interest rates on them, what's subsidized versus unsubsidized is, just giving them all the information about before you go into state and federal loans. This is really what you need to know and be cognizant of, so when you have to pay them back, you're prepared to do so.
And then private loans, last but not least, in the list, private loans should be the last option after applying for all of the other forms of aid. The reason we say that is because we would want them to fill something like the FAFSA out first and explore their options and scholarship and grants money that they don't have to pay back. And even federal and state loans have a lower interest rate, and so this is why we say this to the college students, so they're just aware of those things. Filling out and filing the FAFSA is not necessary for private loans. And these are provided by private lenders such as banks, credit unions, and other institutions like people might hear of Sallie Mae. So it's listed there as an example. We feel that it's the least cost-effective way to finance a college education. However, sometimes it's the easiest to obtain. And if you have a private loan, that's not a horrible thing, and you just are going to be working to pay that back, and they are out there. But we just want to make sure that college students serving as CPVs understand the well-rounded options to paying.
Yep. And even giving the CPVs the knowledge of this is a federal and state public loan versus a private loan. Oftentimes the K through 12 youth and most often the high school students have just heard the term loan thrown around. So really giving them the knowledge that private loans have a lot higher interest rates. They're much less cost effective, though, you know, on first instinct, they might be the easiest to get.
So activity number 4, paying for college. So if you just want to refer to that in your activity packet, what we would do is we would divide different people into groups, and we would be assigning them a funding option to discuss. And I'm just going to read this piece because I think it's an important activity for just, it gives the opportunity to then go back into the toolkit and just research these options a little bit more. But for this activity, Derek, a 10th grade student, is interested in going to college, but he's concerned that he will not be able to afford it because his parents do not make a lot of money. You want to talk to him about his available financial resources beyond family and personal savings. So again, you'd get into groups. Using the information in your toolkit, explain to Derek how this funding source could be useful to him when it comes to paying for college and where he might go for more information. Remember, you are a resource, not an expert, so you're not telling him what he should do. These are just options. And this just kind of gets them, again, in that mindset of they are a resource, not an expert, and also helps students or college students serving as CPVs dig into the toolkit a little bit deeper into those specific sections that they're assigned. And so they would just state their funding option and what they would say to Derek to help him understand his financial resource. Are there additional resources that you might suggest for him to explore this? And then there's just several ways in the answer key that you know, you might give as an example before they get started, since you probably don't have that many groups. But anyways, that's the activity. We are hoping that that's helpful, again, because you're diving into the actual toolkit, just like the other ones.
Yep. And to finish up the training here, this is the last set of 10 easy multiple choice questions. We'll go through this pretty quickly, and then we have probably 20 minutes or so to answer any questions just about the training as a whole or anything from this third section. So question 1. Because a 4-year education can be expensive, low-income students should what? And the answer is C, explore multiple payment options, including federal student aid.
Question 2, scholarships found on the internet. Again, should always be free if they are not a scam. If not, they are a scam. Clearly, I'm having a hard time reading today.
Question 3, ways to pay for college include federal aid, grants, private and bank loans, and the answer is D, all of the above.
Question number 4. Federal financial aid begins with the completion of the, again, this is B, FAFSA. Maybe we should put FAFSA on there.
I know. Question 5, students and or their parents should blank pay to complete the application for federal aid. And the answer is C, never. Again, don't pay, fill out your FAFSA.
Question number 6, scholarships are offered by a wide range of institutions, offered to students who excel in athletics, offered to students who intend to pursue specific fields. The answer is D, it could be any of the above. So all of the above.
Question 7, private/bank loans are ... A, sometimes easy to obtain, B, not cost effective, C, are based on a family's credit rating, and the correct answer is D, all of the above.
Question 8, CPVs are supposed to A, help K through 12 youth pay for college, B, be aware of the possible ways K through 12 youth can pay for college, C, help K through 12 youth fill out their financial aid forms, or D, know everything about paying for college. And the answer is B, just being aware of the possible ways that the K through 12 youth could pay for college.
Question 9, finishing up here, K through 12 youth and their families can complete the federal student aid form online, via paper, neither A nor B. And the correct answer is D, both A and B, either online or via paper. So if you submit via paper, there is a cost to file it, sending it in.
And then the last question, number 10, the application for federal student aid should be completed by January 1st, by February 1st, by March 1st, or it depends. Students should check with their institutions and the federal student aid website, and it is D. It really does depend, and so they need to really check with the specific institution.
All right. So congratulations. You are now a certified CPV after going through this training. I see we have a question from Maggie here that says, do you ever connect some of these financial literacy efforts for youth in communities?
Do you ever connect some of these to financial literacy efforts?
Mm-hmm.
Maggie?
That might be Shauna as well.
Or Shauna? Yes. Is your question, do you ever connect some of these to financial literacy efforts for youth in communities? Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I was just thinking about some colleges are focused on offering financial literacy support to communities or different communities, much like we were thinking about tying some of the resources in the toolkit to access efforts going on, like in Michigan, the access networks. I'm curious, it's really place-based, you know, this may not be everywhere, but it may be a good opportunity in training states to highlight that as I think a good match.
Oh yeah, I think so, definitely. Connecting them to financial literacy resources, or like there's workshops out there, or yeah, for sure. I think that's a really great idea.
I know in Michigan too, we've worked very closely with the SSG office, which is the Student Scholarships and Grants office statewide. So there may be resources that the state has that they can offer to students just as much. So.
Yep, that's great.
Yeah, because I don't know if we explicitly say that or have that as like a piece of this, but I think it could definitely be, and it would be a really great resource. But again, we have stuff kind of just going on. You know, some of the AmeriCorps Vista members are focused on financial literacy, so they're probably already connecting to those pieces and things like that. But perfect. Yeah, I think that's a really great piece to add.
So any further questions about the scope of the training or anything we covered in the third section? Totally open. Everybody's unmuted. You can share in the chat box.
Something while you're thinking that I'll mention is we talked about the process to obtain a certificate earlier, but that's something that you could decide as the trainer. You know, like our AmeriCorps Vista program is going to be training their Vistas as CPVs, and so I was thinking, you know, probably Jenny, our program manager, would sign those certificates and fill those out ahead of time with the date that they're going to be trained, and then she could hand those out after they're trained that day, you know, directly after the training, so that they have those. And I think just whatever process you have in place, just having like realizing like who should be signing those, and I think people have to determine that. But I think like for a program like that, I just think it's a good example to share that, you know, we think, oh, Jenny will probably be the appropriate person for that. Even if the Vista leaders are doing the training, you know, she can say, yes, all like 40 of my members have been trained this year, and I issued those certificates. If you all want a certificate, we'll certainly give those to the Vista leaders and all of that. But, you know, Maggie and Shauna, you'll have to let us know how you want to navigate that. We'd be happy to send you those. But just keeping that in mind as part of, again, the process and the closing of a training, handing those out.
This is Robin. One of the questions/concerns I've had is that the certificate is online as part of the toolkit. So any person sitting in any community could potentially access this certificate and just fill it out for themselves. And I worry a little bit about someone creating some sort of a false credential that might get them into an audience that they should not necessarily have access to. Perhaps I'm too sensitive to liability, so I would just I've always wondered about, should the certificate really be online as part of the process, or is that something we should hold back and send out individually after the fact, just for a safety mechanism? But too many child abduction and I don't know, stories in Michigan. I don't want to go into it. But I think the other piece that related to this training, and I think ties into some of Shauna's questions, and I don't know if Mel and Sam have had direct questions or conversations about this, but for example, in Florida, their toolkit is a combination of CPV and Connect to Complete resources, which to me makes a lot of sense. But I didn't know if there were other states that had gone that route, or if there's a way to kind of intentionally align these two programs.
Are you asking Sam and I that, Robin?
Any of you who may have had conversations with the other states. I'm just wondering if that was just a Florida approach, or is that something National's thinking about? Have other states done it? I'm just curious more than anything.
I'm curious for Shauna to respond to see if maybe she's looked through that.
Yeah, so National is working on a website that I believe is called Making College Happen, and there will be both a access and a success element to it, and so CPV would be the access and CCC would be success, and that's kind of in the works, as well as a bunch of other resources that would kind of add to and provide background to the two programs. And you know, down the line, I'm sure there'll be other programs added as well. I don't know if there are other states that have combined the two. I'm just seeing that the Florida version was just a kind of a taste of CTC. We're working on a CTC resource book, and that will be, the full version will be available in March. So the Florida's version was just kind of, there's this program CTC that exists. It didn't go into much detail. But you know, I could see ways that students who are participating in CTC could become CPV volunteers as part of their CTC service. So I could see a little bit of an overlap for the two programs. But I don't know, because CTC hasn't been fully, in terms of the final tools, haven't yet been released. I don't think other states have brought this together.
And this is Robin, I would just add that I think it's relevant that it is in people's minds naturally, and that's why I thought it was really important for Shauna to sit in today, is she's working on those tools, and for us to continue talking about the ways that they partner and support one another.
I think it has a natural, again, yeah, they should go together naturally. I think that I've only seen Florida do that, and actually I've only seen a couple of states really try to modify the toolkit so far, so I think we're probably just at a space where we don't quite know what everybody's doing yet. On my perspective, I'm sure National might know more than me, or we'll be finding that out in the future, but I thought that was just great to be able to see that on Florida's, you know, their perspective on doing that. And I also know that we're excited about, we hope that we can bring C2C to Michigan, and that obviously we would, you know, integrate some of the, you know, CPV efforts, and also just as a baseline component of that. So I am excited to hear more about that as it continues to progress forward, and hope that in our conversation with Shauna, so I'm so glad she was on the call, on the webinar, that when Robin and I talk to you, hopefully we can brainstorm about what we might do here. And then just as far as the certificate, just a little bit of history on that. It used to be that when MiCC was requesting that everybody who did the training send the sign-in sheet, the reviews, because there's just a review of like a pre and a post test of like, okay, you take this before you get CPV trained, you take it right after, and okay, are you comprehending it? We sort of stopped using that at some point, knowing that it wasn't, we needed maybe more impactful assessments sometime in the future, but to show the impact. But we originally had like somebody at MiCC, I think Michelle or somebody, was issuing those then, but they had to go through and then that's what they really, the AmeriCorps Vista member was helping a lot with because the capacity really wasn't there. And so they were the ones issuing and signing and then mailing and sending, and so there was a cost involved in it, and there was also a capacity issue. So I believe that is also why that went online with all of the other materials, because MCC, if we take it back down, it's just that somebody at National would have to manage that, the time that it would take to do the capacity piece of that. So just things to think about. I don't think there's like a right or wrong way. I think that could definitely be explored with the certificate, but it was just, I think, found at some point that we weren't collecting that stuff anymore, and just people here didn't have the capacity to be issuing those all the time. All right, so if we don't have any final questions or comments, I mean, please feel free to type anything in the chat box, or if anything's pressing in your head, feel free to speak. But if we don't have anything, we'll probably wrap up here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Melissa and Sam, I just want to thank you from the National Office. This was really, really helpful, and helping us think about how to offer this to states or others, and the different variety of just ways to share this information and going into it really deeply. Thanks so much for doing it and for the time.
Yeah, most definitely. Hopefully it puts the toolkit in some better context as well, just seeing the two pieces together and how they sort of relate.
Yeah, thank you. That was really helpful. Maggie and I were commenting on how nicely your voices work together. It was like we weren't even really aware of, like it just was very natural. It was very nice. Thank you.
Yeah, good partners. And it does help in two different voices, which we were talking about how it would work as a web platform, so this was a nice model to experiment with.
Oh, I totally agree. That's why I wanted Sam, to come back and do this with me, because we mesh really well together just anyway, but I think it's just easy to, it's the ease of the transition, so you aren't just monotone voice or like listening to just one person the entire time. So I agree. I think if you're doing it on a web platform, that it helps to have two. So.
Yep.
And thank you.
Thank you. And we can follow up with the recording of this webinar for you guys as well. So you can use it maybe to show other staff or whatever it might be, just as a reference.
And we'll also follow up. It probably won't be necessarily tomorrow, but talking about where are the research pieces that you first asked about in the beginning, and just some of the other pieces about maybe getting some better notes within these slides for national specifically, and that sort of thing. So
it would be great. That's incredibly useful. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for spending the 2 hours with us today, and I'm hopefully it came through that we are excited about CPV, but we just think it is a really great tool. So
you guys have done a great job in building this out over time. It really is a fantastic resource and a deep one. So we appreciate the work and are glad to share it with others.
Well, we're glad you're able to share it with others, and we're very appreciative to you. So we will be in touch then, Maggie, and figure out fleshing out the other points. So.
All right, that sounds good. Thanks again.
All right. Have a great day.
Thank you, guys.
Everybody.
Take care.
Bye-bye.